One series of questions that comes up in relation to your father's time, which is of course the question of corruption, which became wholly associated with the Philippines for a long period of time. I think contemporary court judgments acknowledge the atrocities that were committed, but also the plunder of the country's resources. Why wouldn't you want all of that money back in the hands of the Filipino people?
Well, the narrative.
May I just ask you why that's funny? Why that's funny? I'm asking you a question about the plundering of large sums of money.
And we say, welcome to the United States, welcome to our national home.
Thank you very much, President Reagan, Mrs. Reagan, members of the Cabinet, distinguished guests, my friends. On behalf of the 50 million people of the Philippines, Mrs. Marcos and I express our gratitude for your warm welcome to Washington and to the United States of America. This great and beautiful city, that is one of the few cities that was built as the capital for a great nation, is indeed, as has been written, the key to knowing the secret of America. And this house of the American people, an American frontier that never vanishes. Your beautiful city with its grand memorials, its monuments, its walks, is indeed a city that memorializes the great achievements of your people for the past 2 centuries. But more than that, it keeps offering to the enterprising and the talented, the courageous and the strong, the rewards of effort and of initiative. At the same time, as I stand here on American soil, I realize that I stand on what may be the center of the government of the United States of America, here where, as I have often stated, the future is being born. The future is being born depending upon the man who is in the White House. And the man who is in the White House today certainly is creating a new future for our world. For Mr. President, I come from that part of the world wherein the poorest of the world's population live. I come from that part of the world that cherishes an image of America with its ideals, its dreams, its illusions. I come from the Philippines, a part of Asia, which has been molded along the principles of American democracy. We learn to love these ideals and principles, and we lost 1 million of our people fighting for them in the last war. We have always stood by these ideals. We shall continue to do so. whatever may be the cost, at the risk of our fortunes, our lives, but more important of all, our
President Marcos was finally gone.
The Marcos family looks set to return with the people's backing.
Contradicting who will be the next president.
The son of the former Philippines dictator Ferdinand Marcos has secured an unassailable landslide victory.
Is it in any way? We are a sovereign nation.
Chinese forces have frequently harassed the Philippine Coast Guard.
We will not allow a single square millimeter to be trampled upon. The Philippines now finds itself on the front line against actions that undermine regional peace, erode regional stability, and threaten regional success.
President Marcos, welcome to 7:30.
Thank you very much indeed.
In your speech to the Australian Parliament, you used unusually strong language. Quoting your own pledge, you said, "I will not allow any attempt by any foreign power to take even 1 inch of our sovereign territory. We will not yield." Are you talking about not giving up Philippines territory in the South China Sea?
Absolutely. It is my sworn duty, and the sworn duty of the entire government of the Republic of the Philippines to defend the Constitution of the Philippines. And the first article of the Constitution is the definition of our territorial waters.
You didn't name China either in your answer or indeed in the speech that you gave to Australia, but it appears to be present in every security move that you make, and indeed behind every speech that we've seen you make recently. How urgent a priority is it to counter the fast-growing military power of China?
Well, we don't see it in those terms. We don't see it as countering the military power of any country whatsoever. It's merely the defense of our territory. We have territorial conflicts with other countries, Malaysia, for example, and Vietnam. But we have come to an arrangement with them, and that to resolve any such conflicts peacefully.
So, I mean, I'm right in saying that you don't have that capacity to resolve conflict with China in the same way. Do you actually have direct contact with the Chinese?
We have at several levels. In fact, in January of last year, when I went to Beijing and I visited with President Xi Jinping, that is what I proposed, a kind of hotline between us, so that if there is a message that needed to be sent from one president to another, we can be assured that that message will reach them. And we have sort of established there are several points of contact at the ministerial level, certainly, and a sub-ministerial level as well.
But do you have a personal line to President Xi?
Not yet, I'm afraid.
Let me just ask you this question. I want to come to the what it is that you want from Australia, because that's obviously one of the reasons for your visit and your speech, as well as ASEAN. But the former president of the Philippines, Duterte, was making overtures to China, very strong ones. Have you decisively moved away from Chinese influence and back into America's orbit?
Well, I think it's important to make it very, very clear. Whatever the Philippines does because it is in our interest, not because it has been dictated upon us by anyone.
You don't think that your language that you used when you took office, and the same language that you used in the Australian Parliament during your visit, is a message to China about where you believe your interests lie?
Well, as I explained it to President Xi again, I said it's my duty. I took an oath to defend the Philippines. And anyone who will help me in that regard, I must engage with them.
Was your predecessor getting too close to China?
Well, I think the situation between now and then is quite different, and I'm sure he did what was in his judgment was the best. He did hew a little closer to China rather than the United States. and maybe because things have heated up a little bit, but together with Australia, we have a visiting forces agreement with the United States and Australia. These are the only two countries that we have them with, and we have a mutual defense treaty with the United States, which has been there for decades.
How important is it, from your point of view, that Australia has chosen to acquire and build a fleet of nuclear-powered submarines?
Well, that decision is an Australian one.
Do you support it?
I support AUKUS. I support the Quad, and I think that this just represents a stronger front in terms of maintaining the peace, maintaining the peace in the South China Sea. It is a response, really, to a differing situation, a more dangerous, more risky situation than we had before.
Why is it more dangerous? Just explain.
Because the potential for outright conflict is much higher now than it was before. And we worry in the Philippines because it could come from not a strategic decision by anyone saying, okay, we're going to war, but just by making some serviceman making a mistake or some action that's misunderstood. And that's why the ongoing attempt is always to try and lower the temperature, ease up on the rhetoric, and communicate, and just continue to communicate.
That's why you need the same phone that Khrushchev and Kennedy had, right?
That's right. Yes.
Well, let me try and understand what you might want from Australia. Would you expect the Australian Navy to come to the defence of Philippines forces in the event of conflict with China over disputed territory in the South China Sea?
Well, I suppose if we are in a joint exercise or in a joint operation, then perhaps that would involve Australia in that. But we do not have any formal agreement or treaty in that regard as we do with the United States.
How would you explain to Australian servicemen or women why they should potentially risk their lives in the aid of Philippines under pressure from China? Why do we belong there?
Well, let me take us back to the Second World War, where the defense of Corregidor and Bataan, which were the outposts that held out longest. But because of that, it delayed the invasion of Australia to the point that the Japanese never invaded Australia. And that, if we can stop it at an early stage, nip it at the bud, as it were, then there's no need for it to grow into other areas. And hopefully, if we can, as I said, keep the peace in the South China Sea, that will be of great advantage to Australia, because of the
in relation to the former president,
that we have gone by for the last 36 years now.
history. And you obviously revere your father. I've seen you talk about him. Do you also understand the costs of his authoritarian rule to people in the Philippines?
Well, it was a very different sort of authoritarian rule. I think when people think of an authoritarian rule, it was non-participatory. Whereas I think the version that my father tried to promote and actually practiced was very much still.
Just understand make sure that we're talking about the same thing. I think Amnesty records that during that period, 70,000 people were imprisoned, 34,000 tortured, and 3,200 people killed are the numbers. And your father, in an interview, admitted that over 50,000 were detained. So I just want to ask you again, do you accept that there was a human cost to that rule?
There always is. It was war. And with war, the death and destruction is inevitable. But this is a war not declared by the government of the Philippines. This was declared a war. These wars were declared on the government of the Philippines. And both of them were, one was to divide the country, and the other one was to remove the present political system by armed struggle.
There is one series of questions that comes up in relation to your father's time, which is of course the question of corruption, which became wholly associated with the Philippines for a long period of time. I think contemporary court judgments acknowledge the atrocities that were committed, but also the plunder of the country's resources. Why wouldn't you want all of that money back in the hands of the Filipino people?
Well, the narrative.
May I just ask you why that's funny? Why that's funny? I'm asking you a question about the plundering of large sums of money